Hi there, my name's Andy from Gobbo's Grotto, and welcome back to my Uncon board build for Rise of the Kage. I'm doing the base board before I start doing walls and stuff like that. So part of the board is a little cherry orchard on the way into the mansion house. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just see my other videos for a bit more of a description. So what I've done is I've bought some cheap trees from China. They took a couple of weeks to get here, but they are dirt cheap and they're about £4 for a pack of 20. I'm going to need about 8, but I'm going to use them for other games. And all you do is you just you buy them. They're wire. They've got some sponge, pink sponge attached to them. Look very nice. You just tease out the branches so that you get they come flat. So you can just tease out the branches and just spread them out like so. The sponge isn't fantastically held on, so we're going to deal with that in just a second, but yeah, just going to tease those out. And what I've done, just to give them a little bit of stability till we put them on a base, is I've got these little clamps that I'm just going to clamp them on when it works, and then they just stand up there ready for the next part. And the next part is to try and make the sponge stay on the trees. So I'm just going to show you that in a second while I get the rest of these done. So now I've got all of them all on the clamps and ready for the next stage. What I need to do is fix the sponge onto the trees so they don't just drop off, look like loads of foliage onto the floor. I'm going to try to achieve that effect afterwards. So what I don't want to do is just have bare trees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just some ordinary hairspray. I'm going to use the natural hold because it doesn't have a shine or sheen or anything else like that. So that's why I bought it. Obviously it's not for my personal use. I'm as bored as a badger. So here we go. I'm just going to, all you're going to do is just pick up the clamp. It's in a nice well ventilated room or outside. It's in the middle of November at the moment, so no, sorry, it's in December now. So it's not nice outside here in Kent, but so we're going to do it inside, but with lots of ventilation. So just simple passes. You can see that I'm just doing, you might just hear it, simple passes, and the hairspray just holds the sponge in place like almost like a fixative. Well, it is a fixative, and it's not going to give you great big clumps like a varnish would. It's just going to dry and hold it all in place. So that's what we're going to do. It doesn't discolour any of the sponge. I've tested this particular one. My suggestion would be, if you're going to do this, is to take a small part of the tree and give it a spray with the hairspray that you use or fixative spray that you use beforehand, before you do the whole lot, just to make sure that the one that you choose doesn't discolour. So give it a good 24 hours, 48 hours before you do this stage. And that's all we're going to do. I'm just going to give a spray to all of these things, and then we'll move on to the next bit later. Alright, so when the hairspray is dry, give it another coat as well. We will be doing one more fixative coat later once we finish the bases, so don't worry too much. What I've done is I've just hot glued the trees to 40mm bases for this particular build, and given the size of the trees, actually it's worked out really nicely. I don't want too much base, although I do want stability. I don't want too much base to take up too much space on the board. So the reason I put them on bases rather than screw them directly into the board is because I want the flexibility of moving the miniatures around the board freely, so we can move the trees if we need to, if the players decide their characters need to go through there. So all I've done is I've just hot glued it on there. Now to add a bit more stability to the tree itself and standing up, you can drill a hole in the base and then just pop the tree in as well. But also what I'd like to do is add a little root structure to it. Now, if you've seen my previous cherry tree builds on YouTube, you don't need to watch this part, but essentially all we're doing is we're starting about a third of the way up the trunk of the tree. We're just going to give it a little pull down with the hot glue and just drag it along to make it look like some roots. So we're just going to do that over the base, and this way we can add some stability to the tree and also make it look a bit more interesting around the base. So we'll just do that all the way around. Hopefully you can see that. It doesn't really matter how many times you do it. I sort of try and do it so that all of the corners of the trunk are cool. Corner's probably not the right word. So you've got that kind of look to it. Once it's all dried, we'll trim off all of these sort of trailing pieces of glue, so don't really worry about that. And just repeat over and over again, and then we'll get to the next part. So what we've got now is we've got a little root structure there. I've just painted the base and the bottom of the tree where the glue was with a saddle brown from Vallejo paints. Just that's the base colours that I'm using. And then just to blend it in with the board and to blend it in with the rest of the trunk as well, because the woods are a little bit different, or the browns are a bit different. I've got my homemade textured paint here that I used on the koi pond base as well. So you remember chinchilla sand, PVA glue, filler and some brown emulsion. And I'm just going to paint that on onto the trunk and onto the tree. So just using a big old brush and the paint, I'm just going to cover the bases with that, including the roots as well, and the base of the trunk, because I'm just going to blend it all in. And you can just see it's providing some texture already to represent the ground. Don't worry about blending in with the trunk too much, it's not too bad. A colour difference, and once we start getting the other ground stuff on there, it should blend in quite nicely. So I'm just going to finish these off and show you the last bit. So that's all of them done. You can just see that it started to blend the trunk in with the base, and that all the roots are covered. Doesn't matter if some of them are a little bit more buried because of the paint. Obviously roots get buried, don't they, and all exposed in places. So actually it makes it look a little bit more realistic. And that's a nice stable tree on a base. All we're going to do now is just use our normal ground foliage just to blend in with the board. We're going to do that later on and add a few of the loose cherry blossoms from the pack onto the ground just to make it look a little bit more sort of realistic. Okay, and just to show the trees in their finished state then, so added some grass, just some 4mm static grass and some tufts, and then just left the blossoms to fall onto the base like we did with the baseboard to show and to mix them together. What I've done is I've gone away from the original 8 planned and gone for 4, because in this particular case less is more. And that's the trees on the board. As you can see, it's all starting to come together, and the next part of the build will be the walls now that we're done.